Guys, I am super excited for today's guest. I'm going to tell you, it was actually a ripple that made this happen. I have to say, my good friend Sarah Canaday connected me to Dr. Todd Dewett um, approximately 6 months ago. Sarah and I had been in conversation, having some coffee at Whole Foods one day, and she was like, you need to know Todd. You need to know this amazing resource that I know and call a friend and a colleague. Lives in Houston, Texas. Good dude to know. He's super busy. Don't know if I can make it happen, but if I think you guys should know one another. And I was like, I'm all over that. Let's do it. She connected me. Todd was so gracious to schedule a call. And let me tell you, from the moment we started talking, I felt like I knew this guy my entire life. He was friendly. He was funny. He was very open. He was curious about what I was doing. There was no ego. This guy is a prolific author. He is a prolific keynoter, a massive communicator, been a former professor. And I probably will tell you, I was nervous to talk to him, and even more nervous that he might not see value in going to this little guy's podcast, but he said he would, but he was busy and it was going to take some time and be patient. Here we are. 6 months later, we finally made it happen. He is amazing. We just finished up wrapping up this episode, and I am so pumped. You can see it on my face. I am smiling from ear to ear because he is a rock star. He is an amazing individual, and we get an opportunity to hear about his journey and learn a little bit about his work. But the nuggets that you will take away from this episode, undeniable, undeniable. Sarah Canaday, you knew what you were doing. You were connecting Dr. Dewett and myself. Thank you so much. And Dr. Dewett, man, I can't wait for my Ripplers to get to know you, because they are going to go nuts. They are going to go absolutely nuts because you're that cool, that big a rock star. So with no further ado, let's dive into the episode with Dr. Todd Dewett. Dr. Todd, welcome to the Ripple Effect Podcast. How are you doing today?
I am great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I have to admit something right off the bat. I have become an absolute fanboy of your work. I love your approach. I love your energy, your enthusiasm. I have gone through and looked at all the videos I could find and some of the podcasts that you've been on. And what I was saying in your introduction is that you have just a special energy that you bring to the table. And even though we're in a 2D world right now where we haven't actually seen each other or met one another face to face, I could be watching a video or listening to you on a podcast, and you have this energy and enthusiasm that just comes across in such a way that is really, really engaging. And so I'm super excited for today's conversation, but I wanted to tell you that for sure right off the bat.
I got to tell you, man, that is extremely kind of you to say. I am one of the luckiest people you'll ever meet, having somewhat stumbled into a career that fits like a glove, knowing that we get to help people and make them smile and think a little bit. That's crazy. I can't believe I get to do that for a living. So I appreciate you saying that.
I love that. And you kind of fall, lockstep with where I'd like to take this conversation, which is to give my audience just a little bit of an insider view as to how you got to where you are today, how you became this awesome persona that you are out there in the world. But I'm a big fan of comic books and origin stories and how the superhero becomes the superhero. So how did Todd become the Superman that he is right now?
Funny, Steve. It's a great question. I'm doubling down on saying I'm a lucky person. Don't get me wrong. I'm smart. I'm hardworking. I've taken some principled risks, etc. But I'm also very lucky. So my first career was Andersen and Ernst & Young, a very small number of years with these very large firms, service industry, consulting firms. Great place to start for anyone. It certainly was for me. It was inspiring to see so many smart, educated, hardworking people. But culturally, it didn't fit. Fascinated by business, fascinated by people. And yet I knew I didn't quite fit in the traditional corporate setting. At least that's what my gut said. I tried a second place, which was Andersen, now called Accenture. It confirmed what I knew. I needed to get out. So I started a second career and got a Ph.D. at Texas A&M in organizational behavior in the business school. Kind of the business school's amalgamated version of a shrink, really. We studied employees and teams and leadership at work, drawing from psychology and many other areas. And I loved doing that. Knew I had found that career 2 fit like a glove, finished the degree, became a professor up in Ohio at a place called Wright State University. Loved
Okay.
that, did it for a decade, ended up being tenured and a dean, and really grateful to have experienced that in the traditional sense. And then, you know this as well as I do. You make your plan and then life laughs at you and throw something else at you. And I
Yep.
thought I'll be here forever until I retire at 75 and they give me a gold watch. But then this thing on the side started just bubbling where people were calling, hey, we got this event. I heard you speak so-and-so. Would you come out? And then they started offering money and that became an actual vocation. And then about the time I'm thinking, I can't juggle my schedule just quite like I want to anymore, I got a call from someone at a place called lynda.com.
Oh,
Now,
yeah.
LinkedIn Learning, before it
Yep.
was LinkedIn Learning, was lynda.com. Hey, saw your stuff on the internet. We're looking for someone like you to do some courses online. What do you think about online teaching? And I said, well, I'm not a believer, really. Sorry, you can't do what I do in the classroom. And other ridiculous things came out of my mouth, like a dinosaur who needed to be retrained. And so they called me back. True story. They called me back again. And that's when I decided to listen. And since then, we have put my content in front of millions and millions of users in 10 languages in every country around the world, which I think you'll agree now makes me a very lucky person.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that story. I love that trajectory. And I love the fact you took the second call, because what might have happened had you not, right?
Well said.
So what was it that they said on the second attempt to actually finally get you to go, all right, uncle, I'll do it?
Well, it was a particular woman who's recently left that firm. I'll say her name because I revere her and I'll owe her forever. Her name is Jolie Miller. Great person. And
Yeah.
she basically educated me. She convinced me that the future was not the traditional classroom. It was going to be a mixed bunch of things led increasingly by online resources of different types. Their type is just one type of resource where
Sure.
you subscribe and get access to a ton of things. And I started Googling and looking around like I should have, and realized that this person was sane and bright and probably smarter than me. I decided to send them some video, and they're like, what else can you do? I've done a bunch of topics. They said, good, let's go. And I was in LA a lot, or north of LA in Carpinteria, making videos for years.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I love the fact, and you're gonna have to share this when it goes live, but sharp and bright, and you listened. I love how you explain that for sure. What has been the most, so being in the higher education space and obviously the trajectory you thought you were on, was that a difficult decision to make that transition and say, I'm going to leave the safety and security of this intellectual environment that's kind of always going to be safe for me as far as a career path, and then venture into parts unknown? Or was it once you hit it, you're like, okay, I can do it, and I'm ready, I'm not looking back?
It's a great question. And I love to be as honest as possible, because even though I'm lucky, I stepped up and did the things you're supposed to do to try and take risks smartly. I was tenured forever, nice fat 6-figure job for as long as I wanted. And I had 2 kids in elementary school at the time. And at age 42, retired early and left and went to Texas. It's a long story short. I came here for family and for business opportunities, but mostly for my 2 kids, one of my best friends, I'm happy to say, and our boys. We wanted them to see something bigger and more interesting and maybe more helpful than Dayton,
Yep.
Ohio. I love Dayton. If you're listening, Dayton, I love you. 10
Shout
years
out to Dayton. Hell yeah.
I love you. But I like big cities even better, and it's benefited them in all the ways I wanted them to. So yeah, I took a huge risk, no paycheck, no nothing, to build up a solopreneur opportunity, speaking, writing, and making courses, and it's worked out.
That's awesome. Was there, in those early days, was there ever any time where you're like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Or did you kind of hit the ground running and just be blessed by, work just flowing to you?
It was a little of both. I'd say a year or 2 was the step backwards before you can take 2 steps forward type of feeling, where a huge bunch of the work I had initially built up was in the Midwest, for example. And a lot of that went bye-bye because I wasn't a local resource anymore.
Okay.
And then my persona grew nationally and internationally, thanks in large part to LinkedIn and their unbelievable product and unbelievable marketing. And so slowly but surely, the phone started ringing, and it was a slightly bigger, different client over the last decade. And I do give them a lot of the thank you for that.
So what is it that through the LinkedIn channel that most surprised you as you started to pick up momentum and the flywheel kicked in and the gears are flowing and moving in the right direction? What was it that, really stood out to you from doing those videos? Was it that you got the exposure to a wider audience that you might not have gotten to on your own, or were there unique connections that just sort of bubbled up to the surface that really played a role in helping you get to that, continue that momentum, but maybe in more of an accelerated path?
Well, it's funny. You don't know sometimes until you try things in life. You can say that you thought about it, read about it, talked about it. Great, good for you. Until you really engage something, you don't really understand it. I did not know that there was a skill set associated with looking in the camera and making strangers somewhere on planet Earth care about listening. I didn't know that was a skill set. Certainly, I didn't know that I had that.
Yeah.
Turns out I'm really above average with that, and I'm grateful to say it. But I didn't know it until LinkedIn looked at me and started laughing like, we're going to make you read so much stuff you have no idea. So what I was surprised about is that I had a skill I really didn't know. And then the second thing that has surprised me, and to this day surprises me, is the reach of that platform. There are many good platforms out there. They're considered by many to be the best, frankly, but there's tons of good players with different business models right now in that online EDU space that people should care about. But with LinkedIn, I wake up every day and there's messages from someone somewhere around planet Earth, usually with a name I struggle with in a country I've heard of twice. And I'm amazed. And they're like, I've got a coworker who's blah, 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 or my boss said blah, blah. I don't know how to interpret that. What would you do? And I have free little mini coaching sessions with gobs of people all over planet Earth, thanks to that platform.
I love that. I love that. And so you kind of hit it at the right time, right? Because you're doing the videos for Linda and then it ultimately gets absorbed. And, sort of the rest is history, but LinkedIn provides that, that real far reach. And like you said, the diversity of the audience and in the, the type of people that can bubble up, that platform, when used correctly is phenomenal. Right. And LinkedIn Learning, I have a special affection to the content that's on there, not, looking at your content and not a knock on a lot of the other videos that are out there, but the things that I've seen for you and Sarah Candidate, which we'll touch on here in just a second, you've got a hook, a way of doing it. Like you said, you're above average in terms of your special gift. I think you're way the hell above average. You have a way of hooking somebody really from the very beginning. It's like, okay, I don't know this guy, but I want to know this guy. And then, okay, what else can I watch from this guy? And I think I can see how that unfolded so easily because, I won't say I'm not easily impressed because I am. I like people in general, and I love to give other speakers and trainers my attention because I would want it when I'm doing it. But at the end of the day, there are a few people that I just feel like all of a sudden I want to binge watch, and you are definitely one of them. So
that's extremely kind, man. I can't tell you how lucky I am to have discovered that I have that kind of voice and use of voice that people find likable. I'm not sure how else to say that. So thank you. But once again, I didn't earn that. I was born with this voice.
So thanks to mom and dad, right? You got to give some credit, right? To the original OG. So the thing that I find that's kind of interesting, like you were kind of surprised that you kind of hit this next level, but you sort of had to do that to really stand out in higher education anyway, right? So weren't those first 10 years kind of perfecting that pitch, that approach? Because being in front of, I don't know how big a class that you were over, but whether it's 10 people or 500 people, capturing the attention of an audience like that, especially younger people that are in, that phase of their life can be really challenging. So what was it about those early days that you think really kind of helped kind of strengthen and reinforce what you're actually doing today?
Well, there's some serendipity in there for sure. I'm a natural entertainer speaker guy who became a real academician. And so you put those together and it might be powerful for teaching in particular. And in my case, it was. So what I got at this wonderful school called Wright State was a lot of latitude. So I was a pretty big recruit. They were lucky to land me. I wanted to go to a balanced, sane place instead of a place that was a research mill and stresses people out and never gives them tenure, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I interviewed with some of those. They were interested, but I was less interested.
But you were.
I took this job in Ohio and they said, how can you add value? hey, I heard you're starting to do speaking gigs. Great, go make us look wonderful. They were just open-minded
Yeah.
and encouraging, and I got to do any version of being a higher ed personality that I wanted. And I noticed that the more ambitious of us would say, Steve, you're absolutely correct. You got to do these online things and build a persona and a presence and some content. And this is becoming normal and expected, if not a way to make another income.
Yeah.
And I, thanks to Jolie, of course, who I mentioned, I slowly started to realize that was just so true. And I got excited, and I figured that somehow the speaking and the training and the online courses and the professor thing would all work together. And they did until my schedule started to break. I canceled February once. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't in town to teach.
Yeah, that tends to like have a problem, I think, probably with administration. That might be an issue.
Didn't make all my colleagues happy either. I don't blame them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to make a decision eventually, but where I started was a classroom where I could do what I want to and go from being a naturally good storyteller to a honed, practiced, really good storyteller, because I had these intelligent young adults as my audience, and I could watch them react and figure out how to shape a story in a way that gets even harder. So I had knowledge to give, I have tools to give it, and that all led from one classroom to a bigger classroom. It used to be a couple thousand a year. Now it's hundreds of thousands a year.
Yeah. That's awesome. And congratulations on all the success. I think that, I mean, you are, you're definitely in the hero category for me in terms of how you've come about and what you're doing with your career. And I watch it with great interest and hope someday, obviously to emulate something, just even a fraction of success that you've experienced.
Looks like you are, sir. I don't have a podcast that's going every day.
I don't know. I mean, I appreciate that. That means a lot. And I do love this. I love the opportunity to expose my audience and my ripplers to people like yourself that are doing great work. And that kind of brings me back to how we first met, right? So the ripple of connection, the relationships, connections, how we do that. I know you spend a lot of time working with the folks that are interested in how to up-level their leadership game and be more effective and inspire and motivate, but also help folks actually recognize their true talents and their value that they can bring to the table. And one of the people that we know in common is Sarah Canaday, right? And Sarah and I have known each other for years. She's been a fan of mine. I've been a fan of hers. Like you, she's gone the LinkedIn route and been very, very successful. And so I admire her. She's definitely one of my short list of people that I really just love to death and pay attention to anything that comes out. But when she and I were talking, we were having coffee at Whole Foods one day, and we were talking about, she was working on a little project, and we were just having some, conversation, and she just kind of out of the blue, she's like, do you know Todd? And have you ever, seen any of the work that I've done? And I think I had seen maybe one thing that you guys had done together at that point, but she just was like, you have got to meet this guy. He has energy and enthusiasm. And she was like, you guys have a very similar kind of approach to life and making a difference out there in the world. And so when she connected us, I not only very appreciative of it, but what I really loved and admired about you from the minute I started talking to you was I didn't feel like we hadn't known each other for like ever, right? It's like you are as welcoming on a one-on-one scenario as you are from the stage or behind the camera. And that's rare, I think, for a lot of people. And so it really did entice me to like, I'm going to stay on this until we can get you onto the show, because it's going to happen. I mean, my street cred is going to go up 3,000% just by having you on the show. So thank you for that.
Man. You are the best hype man. I'm hiring you. You need to work for me from now on.
Done. I'll be there Monday.
let me double down on Sarah Love. She's one of the cool kids. I'm always a friend and a fan with her.
Yeah,
we work together, and I'm sure you got to say everyone's got a different skill set. When you look at success, she's got many. One of hers is that she's a hell of a connector, and she's done what she did to you and me, with me and a handful of others over time. And that's just something she enjoys doing, and she's good at seeing possible connections that might lead to a spark. So huge kudos to Sarah.
Definitely. She recognizes people that need to know one another, and in a non-BS way, she can make it really valuable to say, this is why you want to invest the time. This is why you need to put a little more energy and effort. There's a lot of people out there that are really good at making connections. And then, these two people come together and they're like, why are we here? We don't know. And it's super uncomfortable and challenging. Connecting for the sake of connecting is not a good thing. I highly recommend you don't do that. But Sarah's really good at laying the groundwork. I think I try to do the same where, here's the connection point, or here's the thread of interest that I think that you guys can explore, which gives you automatically kind of the place to start, right? It's not just two people showing up on a Zoom call or at a coffee shop and having coffee together where we have no guide or direction or no guide rails in terms of taking the conversation. So I love the fact that, she just started with the fact that we had, very similar, philosophies to life and similar energy and a commitment to actually making a huge difference out there in the world. And so that got us off to the races, but she is, without question, definitely one of the more gifted connectors that I've ever met. So,
Yeah.
and I suspect you are as well. But the fact that I think we're here today, is a kind of a testament to the effort that people put forward on our behalf to help us keep our message moving forward and continue to help us get it out there into the world and make sure that we're exposing great people to an audience that really needs to know great people. So.
Hey, let me tell you how much I agree by saying that success is a team sport. No joke, no way to get around that. Anyone tells you difference, full of it. And if that's true, then your job is to remember all the Sarahs you meet along the way who try to do you a kindness, because there's going to come a time and place where you actually catch your breath, and your job at that time is to remember to give back to others the same way they gave to you. I couldn't possibly agree more.
Absolutely, without question. Let me ask you to do me a favor. So framing this for my audience,
Sure.
When they look at your work, obviously you've got a good number of books, you've got your keynote speaking, you have trainings both online and in person. But when you're meeting somebody new out there in the wild, how do you frame what you do for them to understand it? So either to take it back to their own life and figure out, hey, is this a guy I want to work with? Or taking it back into their organization or their company and say, hey, I just met this guy and I got to bring him in because here's what we will get when we do.
Well, it's an interesting question, and my take on that has definitely shifted over the last 25 years. So I used to be doing a lot of consulting and hands-on real work, and the goal then was behavioral change, team functioning change, leadership capability change. So you're looking at how we hire, how we train, how we manage on a daily basis, incentives, and all kinds of related notions. That's a very involved job.
Yeah.
And it can suck your time, and it can create stress. It's also very lucrative among the consulting, training, workshops, speaking courses. In that array of things, it can be quite lucrative, but it also can dominate your life. And for a short period of years, it started to do that to me. I started happily shifting as I realized that I was one of those powerful speaker persons, which occurred to me over a few years of starting to do things that people were asking me to do, that there was a better way on a kind of hourly pay basis to spend my time. And that was the training and speaking, especially the speaking. And so I morphed over 20 years away from consulting. Today, the answer to your question is I try to start great conversations. Most people are scared to even engage, that we know they should if we're going to be better and different next year as an organization. As a speaker, that's exactly what I do. As an educator, I skip the theory, get to the 5 things you darn sure should understand to begin to use. That's the LinkedIn courses. So there's the practical guy online, there's the inspiring guy on stage. In both cases, I'm trying to get busy professionals to focus and maybe engage new, better, different, needed conversations.
I love that. What's the biggest challenge that you experience in today's market doing that?
You know, it's interesting. Similar in the last decade of dealing with so much feedback from people online, I compare that to a decade in the classroom teaching MBA courses. It's not that different. The most common thing I hear, other than thanks or that was very useful, which touches me every time someone says that.
Sure.
What better thing is there than to be useful?
Yep.
Is when they go, I hear you. I like what you're saying. Won't work here.
Yeah.
Won't work here or some version of that is very common. So, for example, I'd take MBA students years ago. We'd do our thing for the whole semester, have a good time. Half the kids that came in, young adults, kids, we're mad. This was required. You're going to make me talk about personal stuff and people, things, and relationships and psychology.
I don't want to do that. Yeah.
And by the end of it, they just they go, "Hey man, that was useful. Thanks, I get it." And that's the greatest thing in the world. But along the way, they say that won't work here, and then we have to work through it and go, "Okay, so you don't think it'll work? That's a really bad use of data." So your data-free analysis. Let's talk about what it means to try. Are there ways you can stick your toe in the water? Under what conditions? When? And how do you deal with the reactions that you're going to see? Let's start parsing it out with specific thinking instead of lazy thinking. That won't work here. So I hear that very often. I have to overcome it, and I get it. People get mired down in things they'd rather not continue trying to deal with sometimes at work. And my job is to go, no, 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 you got this. You just need a new perspective.
Yeah. I mean, have you noticed in in the corporate work that you're still doing, or in the, just the makeup of the audience, a shift in, the kind of attitudes or approaches? Do you get a lot more of that negative, like it won't work? Because what I perceive is, especially in the leadership area, right, there are a lot of, you have this changing, the makeup of what a leadership team is, and sort of that cultural piece. And because of the nature of where we are, where I feel like the vast majority of our society is attention deficit, right? Where if you can't give it to me in a 15-second sound bite, right, on a TikTok reel, then I'm not interested. And the vast majority of people that I have talked to, and not saying this is good or bad, but at the end of the day, a lot of times people are looking for that quick fix. And the dynamics of what you work on, or where you focus your energy for your work, it requires rolling up the sleeves and putting in that effort. And, those that are looking for the quick fixes, I could see probably being probably your biggest, detractors, in terms of like, hey, it won't work here because, we tried that, done that, or we read a new book and the leader doesn't get it and doesn't understand it, or there's inconsistency. But just this whole generational shift in where we are within the corporate world, where does that leave you today? How challenging is that, and how do you overcome it?
So many questions wrapped in your question there, for sure. First of all, over the years, people have come to me many times and said, okay, so what's the one or two things, if I just do them, my team will just be so much better. What is the secret sauce, the special that you're talking about, right?
Give me the answer to the test, Todd.
Yeah,
please.
right. Give me the answer to the test, Doc. The truth is, there isn't any magic bullet to be had. There's just not. Every group is different, and they're all fairly challenging because humans are involved. The truth is that success as a professional, especially as a leader, is really the result of a million things, small things, done correctly over time, not one or two things that are somehow huge, done correctly once or twice a year. That's just the truth. You got to be in it on the daily and form great relationships. That's the short answer to it.
Sure.
But you're getting into these generational issues. And I got to tell you, I'm fascinated because on the one hand, we have Gen Z people who have been studied now for a few years, and we know that they're not in love with the idea of professional life. We know that they're opting out more than others. We know that they're working minimal when they get to work sometimes, not over investing. They don't feel purpose. They don't feel justice. Those things tend to be more prominent with C's, for better or for worse. So on the one hand, that's true. And man, that should scare you because we got boomers retiring left and right. We need people to take over. On the other hand, Gen Z, I'm not overlooking you millennials, you interesting millennials either. But Gen Z is also open-minded, interesting, authentic, and expressive about what they want, what they think, what they need in a way that no one's seen before. And that's a net positive as far as I'm concerned for any company that truly wants to change and grow. So you've got these different competing things that they're bringing, one real positive and one maybe more challenging in terms of their ideas, which says what? Well, we have an opportunity. You got another 10 years, give or take, for parting boomers to build bridges, empower and validate and give purpose. Find a way. It's done through relationships. It's done through the reason the company exists, the thing it's doing. It exists for different reasons. Find a way to give them people purpose. That should be your number one goal, boomers, before retiring, if you want to be good stewards of the company, is to light a fire in some way we have not yet done with Gen Z, to get them to wake up and say, leadership could be something that would be a great use of my time. Because right now, they're not really there.
I love that. And, I think the message, to the boomers that you just shared so eloquently is so important, that part of your legacy is 5 years after you've gone and retired, is for those boomers, or excuse me, the Zers and the millennials, to come back and be like, hey, remember how Steve and Todd did it? And, that was that was our guide rails, right? How they approached problem solving, or what happened when there was a serious issue, or some sort of major decision that needed to be made. The way that they approached it, that the value of what you brought to the table lasts well beyond once you've left that company, or that role for years to come, right? And I think that a lot of times, and at least in the work that I've had an opportunity to do, a lot of boomers don't look at that as an opportunity to build their legacy or to recognize the value of what they can leave behind, because there's this natural tendency to be, quite honestly, a little bit scared of the next generation that's coming up behind you, right? Like, I don't want to share all the knowledge and the experience I have because then it makes me irrelevant. And if you're in the right kind of company that really encourages, real connection and building those authentic relationships and having that transition approach in place where, people don't feel threatened and can be more free communicators and collaborators, then the boomer generation, they are some of the best in the world of being able to do the collaboration thing because they grew up in an environment where collaboration was a critical component. But it's funny to see some environments now where it's actually they're kind of sticking to their own and they're closing their ranks, and then they're afraid to have conversations of any real value to these other generations that are coming in because
Sure.
there's this tendency of, or tension that seems to exist between them all.
Yeah, I mean, the companies that thrive in this are the ones who find their Sarahs and
Yeah,
that have relational superpowers, and they turn them loose and empower them. Because without the bridge building, you're going to see a lot of quality knowledge walk out the door, not yet somehow codified in the company, and then a bunch of millennials and Zs are going to have to try and reinvent some wheels, and that is completely and totally avoidable. But you really do have to go find. You can mandate whatever you want to across all of your leaders, but the
sure.
truth is, you got to find the small number, the 20%. Of the Sarahs with superhero powers on the relationship side, and set them loose and find ways, whether it's employee groups, resource groups that have meetings to talk about things, or whether it's a mentor system that explicitly goes for joining old and young, or one of the many other options that we have all read about in the last couple of years. You should be trying them all, because the last thing you want is youngins jaded as all
Yeah,
the seasoned talent leaves.
yeah. I mean, the kind of the work that I do, right? Obviously, building, a primary focus on helping people understand the value of building the right relationships and putting in the groundwork and doing that. When I first brought out my book years ago, right, I really thought this was really a very small niche market. And what I've found is that the vast majority of us don't know how to get along with the other kids in the sandbox. Doesn't matter what generation we come from. And the thing that I think is the most valuable and empowering for me is the fact that you can take someone that has the age and wisdom and they can learn from these younger generations and make themselves even better. And then when they're able to be the educator or the teacher or the master, they feel value of the service that they're giving because they're able to contribute and help a young person with their career path.
Mhm.
And the thing that I find, as especially when I'm talking to like the folks that fall into that boomer generation, when I get them to think about how they interact with, the millennials or the Z's, and try to get them to recognize how important of a role that they have to place
Mhm.
there. It's not just, oh yeah, this is how we've always done it and this is the way it is. You young whippersnappers, need to learn and adapt. But it's a dance, and it's a real dance. But the way that you get the Zers and the millennials to really respond, and I find this is sort of, and I'm curious to your opinion of this. The best way to do that is not even talk about necessarily work to start. It's about laying the groundwork and starting to develop some level of relationship with that individual, right? If you look at that generationally, millennials, they tended to be a little bit more latchkey kids, and they were sort of by design survivalists on their own, right? So they had to do things, they had to figure things out, and they didn't necessarily have someone that they could depend on to be there to lift them up, back them up, right? So they, when they get somebody that sort of is in their corner, they really, really blossom. Zers are a little bit different because at the end of the day, they grew up in technology. My answer to my test is literally probably a couple of clicks on my phone away. So why do I need somebody else like that? So maybe when it's not work related, it's like, hey, look, I have a personal interest in getting to know you as a person, which
Mhm.
for that generation is so needed. You see, I have seen so many of that of the Zers that when somebody actually expresses any interest in getting to know them as an individual and sort of helping them kind of come out of that shell, it's like magic because they have not grown up with that. Most of their parenting, most of their peer engagement, most of their friendships probably aren't face to face with someone, sitting across the table or having a cup of coffee with them. It was online or through video chat or something, right? Or an app. So
Sure.
it's, I'm curious if you see the same. And for me, I think for your work, for Sarah's work, for my work, it's real green pastures because that's what's coming. And that's the area of opportunity for which we can work.
Well, I think it's going to be good for me for certain, Steve, because communication skills in general are going to be a premium asset for the next 15 plus years. And certainly that's part of my wheelhouse. So we're seeing emerging problems. I can praise them all day. I love the creative, expressive, interesting side of Gen Z for sure. But they're also made fun of by being by some as being a little too fragile and a little too expecting too quickly of perks and latitudes and such at work. We've heard all these things. How much is true? I don't know. People debate these things, and there's still research. I do know that there's research that you can't ignore that talks about how little they, to your point, interact with older generations at work, which is frankly the numbers suggest they're actively avoiding older generations at work because they speak a different language in a different way, using a different medium. You're not wrong at all. They've lived so virtually, so online. It's unbelievable. They're the kids of technology and COVID on top of that. And they're not used to conversations. They're used to texting and messaging. And that is a mouthful. So you can't be, I love to say this to my friends that are my age or 50 or over, you can't just be a reader of AI. You got to get in there and use some of that chat GPT and figure out what's going on and get your informed opinion about it, because that's important. And I'd say the same thing to all the older folks that are there now. You're seeing a labor pool of very interesting potential, and they've been trained by you, the parents.
Yeah.
To not be as engaged one-on-one in a way that we need to inside hierarchies at work. And so there it is. What are you going to do about that? You're going to have to elevate some of them to make the rest of them believe that we believe in them as a generation. You're going to have to build some bridges, whatever creative way you want to do it. Yeah, maybe you need to learn a little bit about anime, and maybe they need to learn a little bit about some song you loved in high school. That's what sharing and bonding and rapport building is all about, creating opportunities to make people a little more of a person, not just a professional. And Steve,
Right.
I know some people get crazy when guys like us start talking about this because, hey, we're not supposed to be building best friends at work. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we need to see a sharp end to the life at work where we're all simplistically professionals and don't have a personal relationship as well. Personal doesn't mean you have to be best friends. It means you have to endeavor to see a human, not just a human resource.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, really, if you're looking for the goal, it's common rapport, right? So at the end of the day, try to find something that you have in common. I call it connection points, right? Connection points are these little bite-sized morsels of information you learn about somebody that you file away, but that becomes your dialogue jumping off point in the future, right? Maybe it's their favorite sports team. It's what they do on the weekends, where they put their time and energy when they're not at work. These are all things that give you little glimpses as to who people are. We may spend 80% of our time in a working environment, but that very rarely dictates or represents who we want to be as people, right? And I think when people can figure out how to sort of leverage that, you really open up a whole plethora of opportunity. There was a study, and I'll have to go back and research this a little bit to figure out. I'm a consummate consumer of podcasts and great videos and audiobooks, and I'm always learning, trying to make myself better. But there was a book that I think it was a book that I was listening to in the fall that was talking about the dynamics of generational shifts, right? And in Asia, and I don't remember which specific country in Asia, they actually they tried an experiment to bring seniors and young people, teenagers, right? That wouldn't ordinarily, you can show up at a coffee shop, they're probably not talking to one another, right? Unless that was their grandkid. And what they were trying to do is to show how simple just commonality can actually completely erase the age gap. And the experiment was all around video games, right? So what they would do is take seniors and young people and put them in a room together. And one segment of the study was no interaction, no explanation. You got to figure out the game, whatever it is. So here you have a young person who can pick up a controller and gets it and understands it right away. And you got a senior who's never touched a controller and try to figure out the game. And they're both doing it at the same time. And of course, you see that, they're really not engaging or talking. Then you had another one, a segment of the study that there was a controller between the two of them and they were going to have to swap it off. Right. And so there was a little more forced collaboration, but it was still really, really challenging, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a third, if I remember this correctly, where it was still one controller, but it was the senior driving, right? So how do you learn the controller? How do you get logged in? How do you get the game going? But they were paired with a young person.
Right.
And they had to answer a question before they actually even started, which was something of interest that they both had in life. What was your favorite toy or something? I call these things ripple connection questions, right? But this is what came up when I heard it. And they tried to find one thing that they could start that small little interaction off on a proper foot, right? And just lay the groundwork. And what they found was obviously the first group, not a lot of interaction, and neither one of them really, seemed to gravitate towards one another. The other side, the middle kind of group was a little better, but not really as strong as it could be. The third group, these people ended up becoming like almost friends in a very short manner because they started with something simple. They had a core objective to do together. And there was a little bit of opportunity for me. I have to execute as the senior to play the game, but I need your help to figure out what the hell am I holding in my hand? How do I log in? How do I, get to the next level, et cetera? And I just found it super fascinating because the whole purpose of this study was how do we get more young people to identify and engage with the older generation? And how do we get the older generation to want to engage with the younger generation? Because there's so much value in knowledge, in life stories and experiences that if we stop communicating, that just dies, right? And you see that in the Native American culture. You see it in a lot of cultures around the country, or around the world, that if those things were to stop, then there are a lot of traditions and a lot of ways of life that just die. But when you apply it towards the corporate world, to your point, innovation goes and dries up and things, start to become a lot more difficult and challenging. And these are all things within our control from a leadership perspective to set the table for success.
Yeah, I couldn't possibly say that better, man. We have so many variables we can play with, should be thinking about and trying to shape to create a structure or a context, like you said in that third group, that facilitates something better happening than the other groups. I love that. I love to hear that. It is not a miraculous, mysterious, black magic thing, this thing called leadership. It's about really trying to build a team. This is, I have to say this very carefully because I don't want someone to hear me wrong. But for me, one of the ultimate goals is building comfort, not comfort that you can just be lackadaisical and lazy all day long, but comfort in the face of a decent performance expectation. Comfort through the rapport building you're discussing. Comfort meaning I'm willing to speak up. I'm willing to, this is what some have called psychological safety. I'm willing to advocate for something that might be shot down, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm okay with that because I know I won't be treated improperly. I'll be taken seriously as a colleague with an idea to share. If you can't get to that state, in general, across your employees, if you can't get to that state, all the conversation about creativity, change, and innovation is malarkey. It just looks good when you spit it out to external people. It's just a signal you're giving. But if you want it to be a behavioral reality, you better listen to Steve, me, and a few thousand others who are saying, I know it sounds too simple, but take my word for it. Relationships and quality within relationships is a foundation of eventual risk-taking innovation. And there's just no two ways about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not something that you just go to a training or a seminar and you do it one time and you've got it. For me, I always try to remind people it's a continual practice. I mean, every day you're learning something new. In your ability to apply what you're learning new into the relationships you have, both professionally and personally, is where the rubber meets the road. And I think at the end of the day, if you want to really get good at this stuff, you have to put it into practice It's not just something you dust off because, hey, like you said, we do it twice a year. Or it's,
Right.
hey, we got, employee evaluations coming in. We need to make sure everybody feels love, right?
I mean, that's one of the reasons I love talking about humility. The truth is, you're right. You're never going to get it right first time, all the time. I talk a lot about facing fears and humility. Why? Because it is. And you're imperfect today, correct? Yes. Are you going to be imperfect tomorrow, next year, and 10 years? Yes. Which means if you got your eyes open, you're going to be continually having moments where you need to shut up and listen, where you need to, on occasion, maybe even apologize for something that was received oddly that you didn't intend, or maybe humble yourself and let someone else take control once in a while. There's a million versions of what I just said, but if you care about creativity and innovation, real progress, you got to get a little more comfortable with that nature, that thing called, being uncomfortable. Otherwise, it's just rhetoric, and we've got too much rhetoric in corporate life already.
Absolutely. Oh, no doubt there is too much of that in corporate America for sure. Todd, I could talk to you for hours on all of this. I mean, I'm just infinitely fascinated with your approach and what you're doing. But I want to be respectful of your time. I'd love to welcome you back to the Ripple Effect at some point so we could do a follow-up episode. Because I promise you, this first episode is going to kick off a lot of conversations. There's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of ways that we could take the next conversation. But one of the things I like to do with all my guests, just to give people a little sense of who my guest is I do these Ripple connection questions. They're no gotcha questions. They're just fun to ask, fun to answer. Are you okay with that before we wrap up?
Sure. Let's do it.
Awesome. So I would like to know, if you weren't doing this today and professorship was off the table, what would Todd be doing for a career?
I think there's a couple answers. Probably my favorite, and it would require huge effort and re-education. But if I had to change now or do it over, I would seriously consider being a chef. I like making food and serving it to people.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Do you do that often or no?
I do. And I'm very honest about it. I love spending time in the kitchen with or without wine. And I'm not spectacular at it, but I always have a good time.
And what is it about that really, tickles your fancy? Is it the camaraderie or the...
Sure. I mean, people are hungry, and solving that need, or solving a need so basic and primal, feels really good, especially the 50% of the time they go, that was really good. Like I say,
50%, I like that.
I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm not going to poison you, but I'm not the best. But it's really fun. No one else is stepping up here, so I do it, and I enjoy it over the years. It's this, like, again, it's something primal. You get to feed someone. What's more satisfying than that?
I love that. I love that. It's a great answer. Well, wait. By the time this episode comes out, we'll probably be well into the first quarter. But what was the best thing to happen to you last year?
Oh, heavy answer, but I'm gonna give it to you anyway. The best thing happens that my wife is still alive. She has stage 4 cancer. She's in her 4th year of dealing with it, and she's been taking some therapies that have turned out to be miraculous. And she's doing well, and we expect many more years. So the most amazing thing was that she's still killing it.
Oh, fantastic. That's good. Well, continued prayers for her continued health and let's beat that thing. That would be great. What is the thing that you're most looking forward to in the new year?
Well, always got the idea in the back of the head for a new book. I'm not sure just about that yet, so I'm going to bite my tongue, but I always know that there's more courses on the way. I'm working on one right now. I'm very excited about leadership bravery, why we need it, why we sometimes lack it, and what to do about it. I'm very excited about the next batch of courses.
I love that. That's fantastic. What did the 7-year-old version of Todd want to be when he grew up?
7-year-old Todd wanted to be a professional wrestler.
All right. I love it.
Pretty sure that was true until I was at least 12. Yeah.
That's cool. Who were your favorite wrestlers at the time when you were growing up?
Oh, I grew up in Memphis. So it was Jerry Lawler, Randy Savage.
Yeah.
Ric Flair, of course. There's so many good ones.
I can't show you here, but I'll have to send you a picture of it. But I have a Randy Savage and Rodney Piper, right?
Yeah, Roddy Piper.
Rowdy Piper. I've got somebody gave me these little figurines at one point that you can push it and they have all their favorite sayings. It's one of my favorite things, and always gets a comment or a chuckle from someone when they're coming into my office. So nice. I love that. What would your wrestler name be?
That's a great question. I would say bald Buddha. I don't know. When I was young, I got recruited by a couple local wrestlers in the gym. Hey, it would juice you up and you'd be great for this. I'm like, thank you. I don't need the juice. And you're very kind. Enjoy your life. That man's name was Snowman when he was in the ring. I don't know why they called him that. I don't know. I'd be bald Buddha. There you go.
Bald Buddha. I love that. I love that. If you could share one piece of advice that everybody would see on a billboard as they drove to work or came home from school every day that they could really, sink their teeth into, that would be something that could be potentially life-changing, what would you put on that billboard?
I would say you're imperfect just like the rest of us. It's okay. Just keep learning. You'll be fine.
I love that. I love that. The approach that you take to writing your books, how does inspiration strike you? I mean, you said you were talking about new trainings and you clearly got that level of excitement up when you were expressing that, but do these things just come out of the blue, or are they informed by, inspiration from, visiting with, other, organizations or leadership teams, or what's your creative process
Other
there?
companies in the news, people like yourself, I get a chance to meet all these things. So what we know about creativity, I used to be a creativity scholar before I morphed
Yep.
into a leadership generalist. And what we know is that you cram a bunch of things into your head as an expert in different ways. And that these things, if you're lucky and remain flexible, over time, bits of them will collide in ways that you can't quite predict the timing of or the nature of, and that's a creative idea. So the goal is to constantly be open to possibilities while always learning. If you do that, you may have maximized your ability to be creative. For me, that's exactly it. Always thinking, talking, reading, and then it just comes to me. I need to do this, and I'll sit on that and refine it and play with it. But yes, if you're actively a learner, trying to stay connected to just good people and good new information, that's just going to bubble up. Your head can only take so much, so some of it's going to bubble up. I knew, for example, that I had to write Dancing with Monsters. It's a business fable about a bunch of little monsters who have to learn how to be on a team. And I, 10 years ago, never knew I had to write that. And then it just became an idea that was obvious. Market's not saturated. It's a good vehicle. I have ideas that won't stop about it. Let's give it a shot. And I did. And it came out in about 6 hours.
I love it. Oh my God. It's awesome for your day-to-day creative efforts. And I know you've got creativity for writers. I'm definitely going to order that. I'm curious, what do you do to record these creative, bits of inspiration as they happen? Do you have a journal in your back pocket all the time? Do you use any particular technology? For those creatives out there, tell them what you do.
There's so many new bits of tech. Listen to this, man. He knows what he's talking about. There's so many bits of new tech that will record everything if you want to.
Sure.
But the base idea hasn't changed at all. It's really important. Ideas are fleeting. Even the sharpest minds out there sometimes have trouble holding on to one. So what's that mean? It means you have to capture them however you're comfortable catching them. I tend to dictate with emails to myself everything I don't want to forget. And later when I'm peacefully sitting there in front of the laptop, I've got 10 emails that remind me about ideas and other things that I need to capture in my bigger formal files where I store ideas. And then once or twice a year, I go through said files and I go, that 80% was junk. What was I thinking? But there's really something interesting on those 4 or 5. And then you let those stay and the rest go bye-bye and the process continues.
I love that. That's fantastic. Do you have any particular electronic platforms that you try to put those things into or use in any capacity, or is
I'm
pretty much
an iPhone guy.
You're a what?
I'm an iPhone guy. I just record things there and send myself emails.
Okay.
And tapped into the. I don't have a particular app that's made for this. I just use notes and emails.
I love it. Fantastic. But I think the key takeaway for our audience is, ideas are fleeting. So capture them somewhere, get them down, and then come back to it, spend some time thinking about them and see where you want to put your energy and your effort and where you don't. And,
you absolutely got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Final couple of questions. When you hear the term, the ripple effect, what does that mean to you?
All actions have unintended outcomes. You should endeavor to understand what they are. Some will be good, some will be more challenging or even negative, but every behavior has that potential. It's a way of more systemically thinking about decision making.
Oh, that's clear, concise, and probably one of the best answers to that question that I've gotten. So that was awesome. What ripples can I be looking to create for you?
Well, if you know anyone anywhere in need, whether it's a podcast or an event on stage, a loud, educated, caffeinated, bald man to wake people up, just mention my name.
Done. Yeah. I mean, I already told you I'm going to be your hype man. So, I mean, obviously it's part of my role and responsibility starting Monday.
Nice. I appreciate it, man.
Well, in all honesty, I'm happy to do that. And I'm so grateful to be connected to you. And I definitely I mean, this is heartfelt. I would love to continue the conversation, recording or not, right? But at the end of the day, I'm really infinitely interested in what you're doing and the work you're doing. And I'm learning from you, and I'm finding avenues to make myself better just because of what you're doing. So you're creating some really powerful ripples out there in the world. And I know Sarah knew what she was doing when she connected us, and I'm forever grateful for her. The last thing I'd ask of you is, how do you want people to follow you? What's the best way for them to get acclimated to your work or involved? I know that you've got many books, right? So those are on Amazon. I know you've got links on your website, but what's the best way for people to actually get engaged with you?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for the kindness. I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you're doing out here, creating content just like this very much. So thank you. Easy to find me. There's not many D-E-W-E-T-T Dewetts out there. So I have two major homes online. One is drdewett.com, and the other, of course, is LinkedIn. If we're not connected and you'd like to chat about anything related to what we've been jawing about here, please reach out on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect.
I love it. Well, guys, please follow Dr. Todd and the work that he's doing. Get his books, invest some time. I promise you, I can speak from experience. When you do, you're going to be richer and find value in what he's providing out there in the world. The content is rock solid. And so, Dr. Todd, I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful for your support, and I appreciate you being on the show. Guys, we'll be back again with another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast very soon. But until then, ripple on.